If you're into game development or gaming, you have probably come across this person on your YouTube feed at least once. You may have also heard about the Stop Killing Games initiative, a campaign that tries to protect gamers' rights as consumers, preventing companies from exploiting players. The thing is that Thor, also known as Pirate Software, has been pretty vocal about this initiative and his mostly negative opinions about it, using pretty disappointing arguments for a guy called Pirate Software. So today I would like to give my opinion as a game developer and a game consumer. Now Thor starts the video talking about how vague the petition is, and this is an argument that he will use throughout the video.
To defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games. How would you keep League of Legends in a functional playable state?
But there is a problem with it, which is that just like he said a few seconds earlier,
First things first, what is an initiative? So an initiative is actually not law. It is something that you put together so you can put it up in front of representatives and they can start the conversation.
he then says that this will damage all live service games, which isn't true. It wouldn't damage the games or their quality, it will just hurt the CEOs and their earnings. This petition wants to stop companies from making a game that you own and playable after you already paid 40, 60, or 80 bucks. And he complains about having to re-architect the entire game because that will be really difficult and uses League of Legends as an example. But the company behind League of Legends is making $1.5 billion a year. Are you really gonna tell me that this is out of budget? Also, you can actually play League against bots, so I don't think that it will be that difficult. But once again, these are all scenarios that are yet to be seen, because this is a petition and not a law. He then says this.
So let's go into why this is happening, right? So why did this start in the first place? What is the specific cases they've called out that are egregious? And they have one. It's The Crew. So action on The Crew. The video game The Crew, published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people. Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action. If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games. First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long-running games work. There is a large number of people that buy the game, and that player base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing it anymore. If there's any costs associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs the amount of income for it.
First of all, it's true that there were only 40 or 50 daily players when they closed. But if 12 million people bought the game, then yes, 12 million people lost access to the game. Were most of them never gonna play it again? Yeah, probably. But that doesn't mean that the company behind the game should have the right to decide if we get to play it or not, which is an argument that you will actually use against the petition. And also, since you made a lot of emphasis on the initiative only having one example, this is precisely why laws are made, to prevent things from happening again. We cannot really learn from things that never happened before, so petitions are usually born after a problem, in this case the death of the crew. He then says this.
So let's take a look at this and find out more about the Crew itself. And if we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that the Crew was actually created in 2014, which, much to the hatred of all of us oldies on the internet, was 10 years ago. Oh. So this was an online-only racing video game developed by Ubisoft Ivory Tower and Ubisoft Reflections and published by Ubisoft. So all Ubisoft, right? With that in mind, it said it was a scaled-down recreation of the contiguous United States and included both role-playing and large-scale multiplayer elements. So it had a massive multiplayer component to it. It is an online-only service-based game, and they shut it down 10 years later. On March 31st, 2024, Ubisoft shut down the game's servers, rendering the game unplayable, which is normal for live service games. The only thing that I can see in here that could be a problem is if they posed it as not an online-only experience. But everything that I found online shows that the game was always marketed as online only. If you're going to be buying an online-only game, that means it can only run when it's online. And if the servers need to shut down in the future, far in the future, it makes sense to me for the access to that game to be cut, if it's online only.
First of all, 10 years is not that much. My favorite movie is from 1989, and I am 22 years old. So if the film industry had these predatory practices, I wouldn't even know about my favorite movie. He also justifies games closing if they are only online, because in the future you will have to close servers, since they obviously cost money. And yeah, that's absolutely correct. No one is asking for the companies to provide access to their private servers. We want access to the games. Now he says this.
If it's a single player experience that has online only functionality specifically just to shut down the game in the future, and the online only doesn't actually add any gameplay functionality, I'd agree with you. That's a shitty business practice. But that's really rare. And in the specific cases where it does happen, we should call out that, not just all games and not all live service games.
It was rare, but it is becoming more and more common, which is precisely why we want to protect consumers. And he complains about calling out all game companies and not the specific ones that do this. But that is not the point of the petition. We are not attacking developers, we are protecting gamers and games.
You can't run a live service game on this few players. You can't. Most of the time, especially not if there's anything else that goes into it.
Once again, not what the petition is asking. It feels like you just entered a mental loop where you misinterpreted the petition and are now argumenting against things that no one is asking for. The petition doesn't say, hey, companies who create an online game will have to keep the servers up and running forever. What it actually says is that players should have some type of option to play the game, whether that is hosting their own servers, or playing offline, or whatever. He also says that there are license problems. That just means that they cannot sell more copies. Doesn't mean that us, as players, cannot play the game. So once again, you're looking at it through the lens of a publisher, and this is a law to protect consumers. That's like asking Jeff Bezos to decide which rights workers should have.
There are some people that'll say, well, just make it all single player. Well, I've explained that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you'd have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. When you already have sequels out and the game has basically no players left anyway, it makes more sense to just move on.
And again, with the same strawman fallacy, no one is asking for that. If the game is only multiplayer, and there are reasons for it to be multiplayer, then let people host their own servers. Also, this law is not retroactive, so you don't need to re-architect anything. You just need to design it properly from the start.
It makes more sense to just move on. I don't find that to be a problem from the developer perspective, and I understand that people find that to be a problem from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies, and that's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it.
No, these are not just two different ideologies. This is a matter of abuse to the consumers, because companies hold all the power right now, and they shouldn't. Because companies don't care about neither games nor gamers, they care about profit.
Because I understand the burden that puts if we raise that problem in the way that we are right now. If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them. And we're going to miss out on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV.
Again with the same strawman fallacy, honestly disappointing. He then goes on to defend live service games because you know that you aren't actually buying the game and you're instead paying a license. And it's true that you may know it, although usually you don't because they use words like buy and sell, not rent. But even if you know about it, that doesn't make it right. We have been losing rights as consumers for the last couple of decades at an alarming speed. They sold stuff like Spotify and Netflix as the future because for a couple of bucks you got access to so many new shows and movies. And what that actually cost is for you to lose access to the shows and movies whenever these companies want. The quality of the shows has also been going down because they only continue those with perfect analytics, which is absolutely killing originality. And the worst part is that now that they basically control us, the prices have been going up, and they even added ads before and during the shows, so they don't even offer any advantages anymore. And the same will happen with games if we don't protect our rights. If we have no regulations and let the big titans like EA and Ubisoft do whatever they want, the game industry is gonna die. They even consider stuff like paying per episode to play games, which is ridiculous. So Thor siding with them is not surprising because he is also a game developer CEO, but using the trademark pirate software while siding with the companies, that's just lame. The purpose of Piracy is precisely to protect consumers from stuff like this, as well as to protect the products themselves, to prevent them from disappearing forever. Because if buying isn't owning, piracy isn't stealing. So while it's true that you're buying a license and not a game, that is also a problem. And his only argument is that the proposal is really vague, but once again, that is the nature of a proposal. There are many steps ahead before an actual law is signed. Now he talks for 4 minutes about the person who is pushing the initiative and how vague the initiative is, but he refuses to talk with him and have an actual conversation to understand the initiative better, since he clearly doesn't seem to understand it. And okay, I personally hate live service games, and I would like for them to disappear, but he suddenly turns his argument 180 degrees and says this.
Aside from that, a lot of people really like live service games. as they exist now. So trying to kill off all live service games, as some people have said online, doesn't make any sense either. Live service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They're about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird. I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me.
What? Dude, that is literally the proposal. That is the name of the proposal. We want these games to stay active even after the company has milked all the money from the players. We want to protect the gamers and the games.
If we want to fight for better conditions for players, then fight the actual problem. Don't make new ones.
Seriously, you are the only person making new problems. And now onto the second video, which starts kinda weird.
And the other day I put out a video called Stop Killing Games, saying why I would not support the initiative. Overall, it was actually quite positive. The analytics on it show that people really think it's a good idea. There's a huge amount of like ratio, and I received hundreds of comments from developers thanking me for putting it out because they can't speak publicly while they're at a business or a job elsewhere. A lot of the times, major companies will fire you if you are speaking out of turn and cause a PR disaster for those companies. And since this is such a popular thing among players, most devs aren't going to say anything to you. So I am.
But I don't know. The Bring Back Dislikes extension is not 100% accurate, but it clearly shows that the video had a horrible reception. And as for the comments, I couldn't find a single one that agreed with him, both from players and developers. Cause trust me, he doesn't speak for me. So I just feel like he's lying again. Next, he says that this proposal would lead to abuse against companies, because what this will cause is for people to basically make games unsustainable by using bots, exploiting the game, etc. So that official support is dropped for other people to then monetize private servers. And he uses TF2 as an example, but right now that law doesn't exist, and this already happened as you just showed. So this kind of feels like a classic strawman fallacy to me, because your argument is that now people will have more reasons to do this in order to monetize a game that isn't theirs, but that's just not true, because the game is still yours. You don't need to give other people rights to profit off of your game just because you drop official support. Those people shouldn't be able to make money unless you allow that. And yes, that doesn't mean it won't happen, but according to your own example, it also happens now. You're acting like it's not perfectly possible to create unofficial servers nowadays. I don't know, this second video is even worse than the first one, because he's just creating fake scenarios in his head and argumenting based on them, and also lying. Right now, there are many games that have official servers, and they still allow people to create servers and even to profit off of them. And no one is trying to destroy the official servers to drive more people to their unofficial servers. So I don't know why he's so obsessed with people trying to destroy his specific hypothetical game. His take is that this will incentivize abuse in the companies until the games become abandonware, so that they can actually monetize it. And while it's true that copyright and monetization for abandonware are in a gray area, these games are not gonna become abandonware, because even if you close the official servers, why would you close your company and therefore lose your copyright? That makes no sense. Games almost never become abandonware, because the companies always hold the copyright even after they stop distributing and supporting the games. At minute 313, he literally just says that this proposal would cause all this stuff like bots, exploits, destroying the community to become legal. But how? That's just a lie. And he then says that you shouldn't get to decide whether players can play a game or not, talking about how many of us hate live service games. And it's true that I hate them, but once again, we go back to the same thing. This is precisely what we are trying to defend. We don't want companies revoking our right to play games just because they're old. We don't want them to maintain official support forever. That's obviously not realistic. But they shouldn't just disappear from our library. I feel like he's mixing his actual ethics with his CEO mind, and you can kinda see that when he says things like this. Because this video is about how you shouldn't control what people play. But that's what we are trying to do, so I don't understand. He then talks about the other thing this law aims for, which is preserving games. And he says that preserving social games doesn't make sense, because they won't be at their peak. I'm gonna drive this to the extreme to show how absurd it is. Have you seen the Colosseum? Have you seen the pyramids? They look old and are half broken. Should we just destroy them and build a Walmart instead? Like, yeah, it's true. Most people will never play those games again, but you yourself said that we shouldn't control what other people can play or not. And also, it's almost like you don't consider games art and something worth preserving, which is extremely disappointing as you started your first video saying this.
I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I own my own studio, Pirate Software, by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now. I also run a massive community. We've got about 180,000 people in Discord, and most of what I do is try to teach other people how to make games, teach them that they can make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without any paywalls or bullshit in the way. It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so that our medium doesn't die out. And it never will. And that's the whole intention of all of this.
So, should we just make games and then kill them? Is there absolutely no love or respect for those games that were created? Do you just make games for the money? I don't know. I think that he's only speaking as a developer, but not an indie developer who cares about games. He's argumenting in favor of big companies and doesn't seem to care about neither the players nor the games themselves. I don't mean this as an attack, but seriously.
So why would you want to preserve a game in that state? That doesn't make any sense to me. You want to take down these live service games, put them up on a private server, and then play it with a couple of people. You're not bringing it back at its height. You're not taking a snapshot of what the game actually is. You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense. That's not preservation.
You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense? That's your take on preserving games from a guy called Pirate Software? Considering that one of the goals of piracy is to preserve things, that's just disappointing. But anyways, talking about preservation and piracy, I will make a video about that in the future. Until then, see ya!